The airplane's hum vibrated through Elena's bones as she stood in the aisle, clutching her boarding pass, her heart pounding like a war drum. She'd been dreaming of this window seat for weeks, her one chance to lose herself in the clouds, to escape the weight of the world below. But there, in 14A, sat a woman with a pinched face and a purse clutched like a shield, glaring as if Elena had already committed a crime. "Excuse me," Elena said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "That's my seat." The woman, Karen, as her luggage tag proclaimed, it didn't budge. "I'm comfortable here," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Find another." Her eyes flicked over Elena's leather jacket, her short hair, and the rainbow pin on her backpack, lingering with a sneer that spoke volumes. Elena's jaw tightened. She'd faced looks like that before too many times. Growing up in a small Ohio town, she'd learned to navigate the sideways glances, the whispered slurs, the way people like Karen wielded judgment like a weapon. But today, on this flight from Cleveland to San Francisco, she wasn't just fighting for a seat. She was fighting for her place in a world that kept trying to shove her aside. She glanced down the aisle, searching for an ally. That's when she saw Maya, 2 rows back, her warm brown eyes catching Elena's with a quiet strength. Maya, with her flowing skirt and gentle smile, had been a stranger just hours ago at the airport coffee shop. A spilled latte, a shared laugh, and a conversation about their favorite books had turned into something electric, something Elena hadn't felt in years. Now, Maya's gaze was a lifeline, urging her to stand her ground. "I'm not moving," Elena said, louder this time, drawing the eyes of nearby passengers. "This is my seat, and I'm asking you to respect that." Karen's lips curled into a smirk. "Respect?" She spat. "People like you don't get to demand respect." The words landed like a slap, and the cabin went quiet, every head turning toward the confrontation. Elena's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. She'd spent too long shrinking herself to fit into other people's comfort zones. At 28, she'd fought her way out of a suffocating hometown, built a life as a graphic designer, and learned to love herself despite the world's disapproval. She wasn't about to let Karina Stranger dripping with prejudice steal her moment of peace. "People like me," Elena repeated, her voice low but dangerous. "You don't know me, but you're about to." The flight attendant, a young man with a nervous smile, approached. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, glancing between Elena and Karen. "Yes," Elena said, holding up her boarding pass. "This is my seat, 14A. She refuses to move." Karen rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "I'm not causing trouble. She's the one making a scene. I just want to sit here. Is that so hard?" The flight attendant hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "can I see your boarding pass?" Karen huffed, digging through her purse before producing the crumpled paper. The attendant glanced at it, then at Elena's. "Ma'am, your seat is 14C, the aisle. This passenger has 14A. "I don't care," Karen snapped. "I'm not moving. I need the window for my anxiety." Her voice dripped with entitlement, but her eyes flicked toward Elena's rainbow pin again, betraying the real reason for her defiance. Elena felt the weight of every stare in the cabin. Some passengers looked annoyed, others curious, a few sympathetic. she could back down, take another seat, and let Karen win. It would be easier. But easier had never been her path. She leaned closer, her voice calm but unyielding. You don't get to take what's mine just because you don't like who I am. Move. Karen's face reddened. You people always think you're entitled to special treatment. She hissed, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. It's disgusting. The word hit Elena like a punch, but it also lit a fire. She straightened, her eyes locked on Karen's. The only thing disgusting here is your attitude, she said, her voice ringing clear. And I'm not going anywhere until you give me my seat. A murmur rippled through the cabin. A woman in a business suit nodded faintly. A teenage boy smirked, clearly enjoying the drama. Maya, still watching, gave Elena a small, encouraging nod. It was enough to keep her steady. The flight attendant cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said to Karen, you need to move to your assigned seat, or we'll have to involve security. Karen's eyes widened, but she didn't budge. This is ridiculous. I'm not the problem here, she shouted, her voice cracking with indignation. She's the one causing a scene. Elena felt the familiar sting of being made the villain, but she wasn't alone this time. Maya stood, her presence commanding despite her soft demeanor. She's not causing a scene, Maya said, her voice calm but firm. She's standing up for what's right. Maybe you should try it. The cabin erupted in whispers, and Elena felt a surge of gratitude. Maya's words weren't just for Karen, they were for her. A reminder that she didn't have to fight alone. For the first time in years, Elena felt seen, not just as a lesbian woman navigating a hostile world, but as a person with a story worth telling. Karen's face twisted with fury, but the flight attendant stepped closer. Ma'am, last chance. Move to 14C, or you'll be escorted off the plane. The standoff stretched on, every second heavy with tension. Elena held her ground, her heart pounding but her resolve unbreakable. This wasn't just about a seat, Anna Maria, it was about dignity, about refusing to let hate win. And as the cabin watched, Elena knew this was only the beginning. Karen's eyes darted around the cabin, searching for an ally, but the passengers' faces offered no refuge. Some stared at their phones, others whispered to their seatmates, and a few met her gaze with undisguised disdain. The flight attendant's warning hung in the air, and for a moment, Elena thought Karen might actually relent. But then Karen leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. You think you're so brave, don't you? Parading your lifestyle in everyone's faces. Elena's breath caught, not from fear but from the sheer audacity. She'd heard those words before: lifestyle, choice, sin thrown at her like stones since she was a teenager. Each one had carved a wound, but they'd also forged her armor. My lifestyle, she said, her voice steady but laced with fire. I'm just trying to sit in my seat. You're the one making this about who I am. Maya stepped closer, her presence a quiet storm. You're not just stealing her seat, she said to Karen, her tone measured but piercing. You're trying to steal her right to exist. And that's not okay. The cabin buzzed with murmurs, and Elena felt a swell of courage. Maya's words weren't just a defense, they were a declaration. A reminder that love, in all its forms, was worth fighting for. She glanced at Maya, their eyes locking for a fleeting moment, and something unspoken passed between them. A promise. A spark. A shared defiance. Karen scoffed, clutching her purse tighter. I don't have to listen to this. I'm a paying customer. Same as her. I deserve this seat. Deserve. Elena shot back, her voice rising. You don't get to decide what I deserve because you don't like who I love. That's not how this works. A man in a flannel shirt a few rows back chuckled, breaking the tension. Lady, just move already. He called to Karen. You're holding up the whole plane. A few passengers nodded, and a woman with a toddler on her lap added, yeah, let her have her seat. This is ridiculous. The tide was turning, and Elena could feel its collective weight of strangers choosing fairness over silence. The flight attendant, visibly relieved by the support, gestured toward 14C. Ma'am, please. Let's resolve this now. Karen's face flushed crimson, but she finally stood, yanking her purse from the seat with a dramatic huff. Fine, she snapped, shoving past Elena to the aisle seat. But don't think this is over. Her words carried a threat, but Elena didn't flinch. She slid into 14A, her heart still racing, and pressed her forehead against the cool window. The clouds outside were just beginning to glow with the first hints of dusk, and for a moment, she felt free. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Maya leaned forward from her seat. You okay? She whispered, her voice soft but grounding. Elena turned, meeting Maya's gaze. Yeah, she said, a small smile breaking through. Thanks to you. Maya's lips curved, her eyes warm with something that made Elena's chest ache in the best way. You didn't need me, she said. But I'm glad I was here. The plane lifted off, and Elena's eyes drifted to the window, where the world below shrank into a patchwork of lights. But her thoughts weren't on the view, they were on Maya, on the way their hands had brushed in the coffee shop, on the quiet strength in her voice. She'd come on this flight to visit her sister in San Francisco, to escape the ghosts of her past. She hadn't expected to find someone who made her feel like she could face them instead. Behind her, Karen muttered under her breath, her words too low to make out but dripping with resentment. Elena ignored her, focusing on the hum of the engines and the steady rhythm of her own breathing. She wasn't naive, she knew Karen's type wouldn't change overnight. But today, she'd won a small victory, not just for herself but for every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. As the flight leveled out, the cabin settled into a quiet hum. Elena glanced at her boarding pass, still clutched in her hand, and noticed something tucked beneath it, a napkin from the airport coffee shop, with Maya's name and a phone number scrawled in neat handwriting. Her heart skipped. She looked back at Maya, who was pretending to read a book but stealing glances her way, a shy smile playing on her lips. Elena tucked the napkin into her pocket, her fingers lingering on it like a talisman. This trip was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the weight of her pasta family that never fully accepted her, a town that whispered behind her back. But now, with Maya's number burning a hole in her pocket and Karen's defeated silence behind her, felt like something more. Felt like the beginning of a story she hadn't dared to write. The flight attendant passed by, offering drinks, and Elena ordered a ginger ale, her voice lighter than it had been in hours. She sipped it slowly, savoring the fizz, and let her eyes drift to the window again. The clouds were endless, stretching toward the horizon like a promise. and for the first time in a long time, Elena felt like she could reach it. But Karen wasn't done. As the flight attendant moved on, Elena heard a sharp whisper from 14C. "You think you're so special," Karen hissed, leaning toward her. "But you're not. You're just a—" Elena didn't let her finish. She turned, her eyes blazing. "I'm just a person," she said, cutting through Karen's words like a blade. "And I'm done letting people like you make me feel like less." The cabin went quiet again, and Karen shrank back, her face a mask of frustration. Elena turned back to the window, her heart pounding but her spirit soaring. She didn't know what lay ahead, not with Maya, not with this trip, not with the world waiting below. But she knew one thing: she was done hiding. And that was enough for now. The plane cruised through the night, the cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow. Elena leaned against the window, the cold glass soothing her racing thoughts. Below, the world was a sea of stars, but her mind was on the napkin in her pocket. Maya's number, a quiet promise of something new. Yet Karen's presence in 14C lingered like a storm cloud, her muttered complaints a constant reminder of the fight that wasn't over. Elena glanced at Maya, who was now sketching in a small notebook, her face serene under the overhead light. Their earlier conversation at the airport replayed in Elena's mind how Maya had talked about her work as a community organizer, her passion for helping marginalized voices find their strength. It was the kind of purpose Elena admired, the kind she'd always wanted to embody but never quite knew how. Now, with Karen's hostility simmering nearby, Elena felt a pull to prove something not just to Karen, but to herself. Karen shifted in her seat, her purse rattling with every exaggerated movement. "Unbelievable," she muttered, loud enough for Elena to hear. "This generation thinks they can do whatever they want." Elena's fingers tightened around her ginger ale can. She could ignore it, let the flight pass in tense silence. But something in her refused to stay quiet. She turned to Karen, her voice calm but deliberate. "You keep talking about me like I'm the problem. But you're the one who tried to take something that wasn't yours." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I don't need a lecture from you," she snapped. "I've lived a good, moral life. I raised 3 kids, paid my taxes, went to church every Sunday. What have you done?" The jab stung, but Elena didn't falter. "I've lived," she said simply. "I've loved. I've fought for every scrap of happiness in a world that people like you try to make smaller. That's what I've done." A few passengers turned, their curiosity piqued. Maya looked up from her notebook, her eyes bright with encouragement. Elena felt a surge of strength, like she was speaking not just for herself but for every person who'd ever been judged for who they were. Karen's face twisted. "You don't get to lecture me about the world," she said, her voice rising. "You're the ones changing everything, shoving your agenda down our throats." "Agenda?" Elena laughed, sharp and unapologetic. "My agenda is to live my life without people like you telling me I don't deserve to. That's it." The woman with the toddler from earlier leaned forward. "Can you two keep it down?" she said, her voice weary but firm. "Some of us are trying to sleep." Elena nodded, chastened. "Sorry," she said, lowering her voice. But Karen wasn't done. She leaned closer, her whisper venomous. "You'll never be normal," she said. "No matter how loud you get." The words hit like a knife, slicing through years of armor. Elena's mind flashed to her teenage years hiding her first crush, lying to her parents, hearing her mother sob when she came out. Normal. It was a word she'd spent her life running from, only to find it didn't exist. She turned to Karen, her voice steady despite the ache. I don't want your version of normal. I want mine. Maya stood, her notebook tucked under her arm, and moved to the empty middle seat in Elena's row. Mind if I join you? She asked, her voice light but her eyes locked on Karen, daring her to say something. Elena's heart lifted. Not at all, she said, sliding her backpack under the seat to make room. Maya settled in, her shoulder brushing Elena's, a quiet act of solidarity that felt louder than any argument. Karen huffed, turning to stare at the aisle, but her silence spoke volumes. The cabin settled again, the hum of the plane a backdrop to the tension. Elena glanced at Maya, who was now sketching a cityscape, her pencil moving with quiet confidence. You're good at that, Elena said, nodding at the drawing. Maya smiled, her eyes crinkling. Thanks. That's how I process things. You should try it sometime. Maybe I will, Elena said, her voice softer now. She hesitated, then added, thanks for, back there. Maya's smile deepened. You don't need to thank me. I've been where you are. Sometimes you just need someone to have your back. Elena nodded, her throat tight. She'd spent so long fighting her battles alone, her family's rejection, her hometown's judgment, the endless small slights that wore her down. Maya's presence felt like a gift, one she wasn't sure she deserved but was determined to hold on to. As the flight wore on, the cabin grew quieter, most passengers dozing or lost in their screens. Elena pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos of her life in Cleveland, her small apartment, her dog, her latest design projects. It was a good life, hard one, but it felt incomplete. She glanced at Maya, who was now writing something in her notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. What's that? Elena asked, curious. Maya hesitated, then turned the notebook to show her. It was a poem, the words flowing in neat, looping script. In the spaces where we're told we don't belong, we build our own homes. Elena's breath caught. That's beautiful, she said. Did you just write that? Maya nodded, a little shy. Inspired by you. Actually, you didn't back down. That takes guts. Elena felt her cheeks warm. I don't always feel brave, she admitted. Sometimes I'm just tired. Maya's hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that sent a spark through Elena's veins. I get that, Maya said. But you're still here, fighting. That's what matters. For the first time in hours, Elena felt the weight of Karen's presence fade. She leaned back, her shoulder still touching Maya's, and let herself imagine a world where she didn't have to fight so hard to be seen. The plane droned on, carrying them toward San Francisco, toward a future that felt just a little brighter. The plane descended toward San Francisco, the city's lights twinkling like a promise below. Elena's heart was still racing from the earlier confrontation, but Maya's presence beside her felt like an anchor, steadying her against the storm of Karen's hostility. The napkin with Maya's number was a quiet weight in her pocket, a reminder that this flight was more than a battle, it was a beginning. Karen had been silent for the last hour, her arms crossed, her face a mask of resentment. But Elena could feel her eyes, sharp and judgmental, every time she laughed at something Maya said or their hands brushed. It was a familiar feeling, being watched, judged, reduced to a label. But tonight, with Maya's warmth beside her, Elena felt something new, defiance laced with hope. Maya closed her notebook, tucking it into her bag. "So," she said, her voice playful, "what's waiting for you in San Francisco?" Elena smiled, grateful for the shift in focus. "My sister, Jess. She moved out here a few years ago, got married, started a family. She's the only one who," she trailed off, not wanting to drag the weight of her past into this moment. Maya tilted her head, her eyes gentle. "The only one who what?" Elena hesitated, then let the truth spill out. "The only one in my family who didn't turn their back on me when I came out. She's my safe harbor." Maya's expression softened. "That's beautiful. You're lucky to have her." "Yeah," Elena said, her voice thick. "I just wish it didn't feel like I had to cross a battlefield to get to her." Maya reached out, her hand resting lightly on Elena's arm. "You're not alone in that battlefield anymore," she said, her voice steady. "Not today." The words hit Elena harder than she expected, stirring something deep and raw. She wanted to say something back, to tell Maya how much her support meant. But the plane's intercom crackled to life, announcing their descent. The cabin stirred, passengers adjusting seats and gathering belongings. Karen, still in 14C, muttered something under her breath, but Elena ignored her, focusing on the city lights growing closer. As the plane touched down, the cabin erupted in the usual chaos, seatbelts unbuckling, overhead bins opening, people shuffling toward the aisle. Elena stood, stretching her legs, and caught Karen's eye. The older woman's glare was unrelenting, but Elena held her gaze, refusing to look away. She wasn't the scared teenager hiding in her bedroom anymore. She was here, visible, unapologetic. Maya stood beside her, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "You want to grab a coffee at the airport?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes hopeful. "I've got a couple hours before my connecting flight." Elena's heart leapt. "Yeah," she said, a grin spreading across her face. "I'd like that." They moved toward the exit, the crowd pressing around them. Karen was right behind, her purse clutched like a weapon, her muttered complaints blending into the noise. Elena tried to focus on Maya, on the possibility of coffee and conversation. But Karen's voice cut through the din. "You think you've won," Karen said, her words sharp and deliberate, aimed at Elena's back. "But people like you never do." "Not really." Elena froze, her hand tightening on her backpack strap. The words were a dagger, slicing through the fragile hope she'd been building. She turned, facing Karen head-on, the crowd parting around them like a stage. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. "I win every day I get to be myself. And no one, not you, not anyone can take that away." The terminal was a blur of faces, but Elena felt every eye on her. A young couple nearby exchanged a glance, the woman nodding slightly in approval. An older man in a suit raised an eyebrow, but his expression wasn't unkind. Maya stepped closer, her shoulder brushing Elena's, a silent show of support. Karen's face reddened, but she didn't back down. "You're delusional," she spat. "This world doesn't bend for people like you." "Maybe it should," Maya said, her voice calm but cutting. "Maybe it's time the world learned to make room." The crowd murmured, a mix of agreement and discomfort. Elena felt a surge of gratitude for Maya, for the strangers who didn't look away. She turned to Karen, her voice softer now, but no less resolute. "I'm not asking for your approval. I'm asking for you to see me as a person. That's all." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. For the first time, she looked uncertain, her certainty cracking under the weight of Elena's truth. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility, until Karen turned away, disappearing into the crowd without another word. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Maya's hand found hers, a brief squeeze that felt like a lifeline. "You okay?" Maya asked, her voice soft. "Yeah," Elena said, her voice steady now. "More than okay." They walked toward the terminal's coffee shop, the noise of the airport fading into the background. Elena's heart was still racing, but it wasn't just from the confrontation. It was from Maya's hand brushing hers, from the possibility of a connection she hadn't dared to hope for. San Francisco stretched out beyond the airport, a city of new beginnings, and for the first time, Elena felt ready to meet it. As they ordered their coffees, Elena glanced at the napkin in her pocket. Maya's number, a small, tangible promise. She didn't know what the future held, not with Maya, not with her sister, not with the world. But she knew she'd keep fighting, keep loving, keep claiming her place. And that was enough. The airport coffee shop was a haven of warm lights and the rich scent of espresso, a stark contrast to the sterile tension of the plane. Elena and Maya sat across from each other, their cups steaming, the hum of conversation around them a soft backdrop. Elena's heart still carried the weight of Karen's words, but Maya's presence, her quiet strength. Her easy smile made it easier to breathe. "You were incredible back there," Maya said, stirring her latte, her eyes bright with admiration. "Not everyone would have stood up like that." Elena shrugged, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I didn't feel incredible. I just couldn't let her win. Not this time." Maya leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "You didn't just win a seat, Elena. You showed everyone on that plane that you're not invisible. That's huge." Elena's throat tightened. She'd spent so long feeling like she had to shout to be heard, to prove she deserved to exist. Maya's words were a reminder that sometimes the loudest victories were the quiet ones, the moments when you refused to shrink. "Thanks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad you were there." Maya's smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Me too." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it had in the airport earlier that day. Maya shared stories of her work, of organizing rallies for queer youth, of the kids she'd helped find their voice. Elena talked about her designs, her sister, the dog she'd adopted to fill the silence of her apartment. Every word felt like a bridge, connecting them across the divide of their separate lives. As the clock ticked closer to Maya's connecting flight, Elena felt a pang of dread. She didn't want this to end, not the conversation, not the spark, not the feeling of being seen. She pulled the napkin from her pocket, smoothing it out on the table. "So," she said, her voice teasing. You give your number to every stranger you meet at airports. Maya laughed, her eyes crinkling. Only the ones who fight for their window seats. Elena grinned, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Good to know. The announcement for Maya's flight crackled over the speakers, and they both stood, reluctant to break the moment. Maya slung her bag over her shoulder, her eyes lingering on Elena's. Call me, she said, her voice soft but certain. I mean it. I will, Elena promised, her fingers brushing Maya's as they said goodbye. She watched Maya disappear into the crowd, her heart full and aching all at once. Outside, San Francisco's night air was cool and sharp, a city alive with possibility. Elena hailed a cab to her sister's house, the napkin tucked safely in her pocket. The drive was quiet, the city's lights blurring past, but her mind was on the plane, on Karen, on the lesson she'd taught not just to her but to herself. Karen had been wrong. The world wasn't a monolith of hate, it was a tapestry of people. Some cruel, some kind, all weaving together to shape the future. Elena had spent so long fighting to be seen, but today, she'd done more than that. She'd shown a plane full of strangers that love wasn't a threat, that courage wasn't a choice but a necessity. And in Maya, she'd found a glimpse of something worth fighting for. When she arrived at Jess's house, her sister was waiting on the porch, her toddler asleep in her arms. You made it, Jess said, pulling her into a hug. How was the flight? Elena laughed, the sound raw and real. Eventful, she said, and left it at that. She'd tell Jess everything later, the seat, Karen, Maya, but for now, she just wanted to hold on to the moment, to feel the warmth of her sister's embrace. That night, as she lay in the guest room, Elena pulled out her phone and typed Maya's number. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen, then typed a simple message. Hey, it's Elena. Made it to SF. Thanks for today. The reply came almost instantly. Glad you're safe. Call me tomorrow. Elena smiled, her heart soaring. She didn't know what the future held, whether Maya would be a friend, a flame, or something more. But she knew one thing. She was done letting people like Karen define her story. She'd claimed her seat, her voice, her truth. And in front of everyone, she'd shown that love was worth fighting for. As she drifted to sleep, the city humming outside, Elena felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest. The world might not bend easily, but it would bend. And she'd be there, unapologetic and unafraid, helping it along.